Welcome to episode 4 of Revisiting the Classics. And this week I have brought you F.E.A.R, which is a game I have some really good memories of. F.E.A.R stands for First Encounter Assault Recon and was released in October 2005 by Monolith Productions. A few years later, it was ported to the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, and two DLCs, at the time still lovingly known as expansion packs, were also released. After last week's lackluster video on BioShock, which unfortunately showed my displeasure at remembering the game better than it actually was, I decided I should postpone the stealth episode and review a solid horror game. Hopefully this one scores as well as I think it will. To this day, F.E.A.R is the only horror game that has ever caused me to jump, and it quite regularly got my heart rate up. And let's be honest, is there anything more terrifying than a creepy little girl with supernatural powers hell bent on righting the wrongs done to her? My answer is, well, probably, but I haven't encountered it. I decided that, to start off, I would scroll through some reviews of F.E.A.R on GameSpot to see what people thought of and still think of the game. Now, some reviews hated on F.E.A.R simply due to the controls. I personally don't remember an issue with them, but I will make a point to review them myself. Others yet had an issue with the story, saying it was hard to follow, and upon completion of the game, they were as confused as they were going into it. I strongly disagree with this, but I will address this later on in this video. The same review did go on to say some good things, but also that the game was essentially broken, what with inaudible audio, screen tearing, bad frame rates, etc. But the guy also made a point to say it was 10 years after release, and I could imagine that being his problem alone. When I originally played the game, it was crisp, audio was on point, and it flowed well. We'll see. Overall, the reviews are overwhelmingly positive with a score of 9.1 on GameSpot, and I'm sure mine will be positive also. When it comes to game design, I like to break it down into several categories: world design, character interaction and uniqueness, graphics, controls, audio, lore, and story. The game world is linear, and there's no way around that. There's no illusion of an open world here. However, it's presented in a way that's believable and immersive. It's set in a real world type location: office buildings and laboratories and rooftops. It does vary during the dream and horror sequences, but not in any drastic way. There are also some fun dynamics to this world. Voice messages on phones throughout the world don't really give you any insight into events, but they do help it make it feel like the place you're in is part of a much bigger world. You also can shoot fire extinguishers for explosive control of an area, and there are at times some pipes and valves you can shoot for this same purpose. As for characters, your player character is a week-old transfer to a special forces team designed to combat supernatural forces, and throughout the game, we never hear your name. We do see your team, but generally only in cutscenes. You are essentially alone the whole game. You are the point man for yourself, I suppose. There are two members in your team besides you. One is a typical video game soldier boy with a bit of a jealous streak that the new guy, you, is taking point, and a girl who seems to be more of a technical, behind the scenes sort. There's also the commander of F.E.A.R, which he is mostly relegated to radio communications. There are a few other characters, but the one you really should pay attention to the most is Alma Wade, and the story surrounding her existence. She's the girl. Fear her. Another character is Paxton Fattel, and he is what passes for a boss in this game. And he controls an army of clone soldiers via telepathy. He's why you were dispatched to the place you're at, and his soldiers are the ones that you have to mow down throughout the game. He also appears to be a cannibal, which I don't think is ever properly explained, but it adds intrigue. But is Fattel the top of the enemy tree? Not entirely. He's more like a fanatical cult leader, and Alma Wade is his cult deity. The graphics were great when the game was first released, and even now, 15 years later, they still look pretty damn good. The age does have its drawbacks though, such as some low-res textures, decals, and models throughout, but the textures are passable. Bump mapping exists, and it has a volumetric lighting system that's not far behind more recent game technology. One issue with running a game this old at 1080p is that it wasn't designed for that resolution and requires UI tweaking to get the text to a legible size. Overall, I am still impressed with the quality of this game, and while playing it, I don't get the sensation that I am playing something that came out ages ago. I had no issues with screen tearing, like the review previously mentioned, but I did periodically have issues with severe graphical lag, dropping the frames to an irritatingly low amount, and the only solution I found was to save the game and exit completely. This is likely due to the fact that it was never designed to run on modern technology, and I don't recall these issues back when the game was new. That being said, it barely hampered my enjoyment of the game because it didn't happen often enough to be intrusive. As I said before, I would make special note of the controls. While their functionality is, well, functional and completely playable, they aren't the best. The mouse on default settings was insanely sensitive, and I had to dial it back from just under half in the settings to barely a quarter sensitivity. The toggle to aim is also annoying, but something that can be overlooked as you focus more on the game. Honestly, though, the controls aren't a reason to hate Fear, and even with the limitations they offer, I don't consider them a hindrance when it comes to enjoyment. And about the audio, also mentioned previously, well, I think the reviewer had his own issues. My audio on a fresh install of the game was very good. The commander on the radio was loud and clear. Ambient sounds were on point. There was at one point an area where I kicked a bucket and it made a weird noise. I do remember this from when I played originally 15 years ago, as it was distinctly wrong. More like 15 buckets all being kicked together. Small detail though. When it comes to the lore, there isn't much depth to this game in the beginning. But as the game progresses, you learn of secret experiments and you learn of Alma Wade. I should also point out that myself and many other people always subconsciously compare game lore to that of Fallout or Elder Scrolls. But if I'm being honest, that isn't fair. For what this game is, the lore and information provided throughout is more than acceptable. As for the story, you are the point man for an elite team that never has your back, that's designated to track and combat supernatural threats. Your mission, should you choose to, that is, your mission is to track and kill Paxton Fattel with the aid of cannon fodder. I mean the Delta forces. As you go along, you encounter some brutal stuff, and you encounter Alma. She's a sweetheart. Now, since I have no desire to spoil anything here, I'll just say that the story is good, well worth paying attention to should you play through it. You're alone. The main aspect of this game is its suspense and horror elements to get your heart beating and your nerves on edge, but the game also has a solid first-person shooter combat element. You will fight soldiers mostly, monsters occasionally, and a scary girl almost never. She's invincible, I think, but at least you yourself are supernatural in your own right, with abilities like slow-mo, which makes for a fun dynamic. Enemy AI is surprisingly good, having effective cover fire, take cover, and back routing capabilities. I watched an AI soldier dive over a windowsill that was shot out during a gunfight. And then I also watched a soldier that was in front of me find another path that tried to come behind me. I turned around and he was coming through a door crouched to shoot me in the back. That's insane. Now, while the focus of the game is on its suspense, the combat is still a challenge of its own. You can die fairly quickly after taking just a few shots from an SMG. This game did feature multiplayer in the past, which I personally never experienced. Multiplayer functionality is no longer available for this game though, and even Steam announces it's being sold as single player only. The game does have downloadable content, two DLCs for that matter. One of them is called Extraction Point, and it's a simple DLC where basically you must make it to an extraction point and escape the city via helicopter. It's exhilarating, if a little run of the mill. The second DLC is called Perseus Mandate, and it takes place during the main game and the Extraction Point DLC. It follows a second F.E.A.R team, which oddly is never mentioned during the main campaign, as they are tasked with investigating the Armacam core project Perseus. This DLC includes new enemies and new friendly, helpful NPCs that will actually shoot at enemies with you. My final score for F.E.A.R is 8 out of 10. This game is quite worthy of revisiting, and playing it again has given me a lot of enjoyment. I would have given it a score of 9 out of 10, but it fell down a point when I experienced the graphical lag spikes. That issue may not be one that everyone will encounter, though, and perhaps it was due to my computer. I run a brand new NVIDIA RTX 2060, and this is the first and only game to exhibit issues such as this. Perhaps it could be something that came in my version of the game from GOG.com, which is Good Old Games, which is where I got the game because it was not available as a standalone game on Steam. Beyond all that, the game is fantastic. I love it, and I recommend that anybody who's interested in this game try it out. Or if you've played it before, jump back in. It's worth it. And as always, I ask that you consider liking the video and possibly subscribing to my channel. Beyond that, I stream every Saturday around 7 p.m. Central Standard Time and randomly throughout the week. Stop in, say hi, make suggestions, or we can discuss games or even play around together. With that, I hope to see you next time and take care.